Officer Jack Lucky Martinez stood at his post in Nexus 9 Intergalactic Detention Center, watching with mild amusement as a group of new alien guards huddled at the far end of the corridor, occasionally casting nervous glances in his direction. After 3 years on the job, he'd gotten used to this reaction. Being the only human on staff tended to have that effect on his colleagues. "Did you know they can survive multiple bone fractures?" he heard one of them whisper, their translucent antennae quivering with anxiety. "I heard they can regrow their outer shell," another chimed in, all six eyes widening. "That's fingernails," Lucky muttered under his breath, not bothering to correct them anymore. "We can regrow fingernails." The huddle of guards scattered like startled space pigeons when Lucky shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He sighed, checked his watch, standard Earth time, which he kept despite the facility running on galactic standard, and prepared for another thrilling day of being treated like a walking apocalypse. The thing was, Lucky hadn't asked to be assigned to Nexus 9. He'd actually applied to be a mall cop back in Phoenix. But apparently, when your species comes from what the Galactic Council classifies as a Class 12 death world, your career options become surprisingly limited. The insurance costs alone meant most places wouldn't hire humans for security work, something about being too effective. Nexus 9 itself was a marvel of alien architecture, if you were into the whole physics-defying, geometric impossibility aesthetic. The prison was built like a Klein bottle turned inside out, with gravity that changed direction depending on which section you were in. The security systems were equally bizarre, everything from quantum-entangled force fields to empathy amplifiers that were supposed to make the inmates feel really bad about their life choices. Lucky's personal favorite was the moral recalibration chamber, which was just a room where they showed inmates pictures of baby animals from various planets. Somehow, this was considered maximum security therapy in 7-star systems. "Officer Martinez," a voice chirped from behind him. Lucky turned to face Warden Assistant Pip Pop, a floating cloud of bioluminescent particles that had somehow managed to wear a clip-on tie. "Your quarterly psychological evaluation is due. We need to ensure your inherent Death Worlder aggression remains within acceptable parameters." Lucky nodded, keeping his face carefully neutral. "Of course. Would you like me to fill out Form 223B now, or should I wait until after I finish being terrifying for the day?" "Oh, Pip-Pop's particles scattered slightly in alarm. Perhaps after your shift would be best, when you're less human. I'll try to schedule that in between my daily ritual of consuming the souls of my enemies and my evening workout routine." Pip-Pop let out what might have been a nervous laugh, though it sounded more like wind chimes having an anxiety attack, and quickly floated away. Lucky checked his watch again and began his patrol route through the prison's twisting corridors. As he walked, he passed cells containing some of the galaxy's most dangerous criminals, a telepathic tax evader, a sentient cloud of cosmic dust that had tried to trademark the concept of darkness, and even a hyper-intelligent space hamster who wouldn't stop trying to teach quantum physics to other inmates. The hamster, known as Professor Squeaks, was currently working on what appeared to be complex mathematical equations written in sunflower seeds. Lucky made a mental note to request another audit of the prison's contraband detection systems. He was pretty sure advanced calculus qualified as a weapon in at least 3 sectors. As he completed his first round, Lucky couldn't shake the feeling that something was off today. Maybe it was the way the quantum force fields seemed to be flickering slightly out of sync, or how the empathy amplifiers were broadcasting more guilt than usual. Or maybe it was just that the artificial gravity in Section C was making his feet stick to the ceiling instead of the floor. Either way, Lucky had learned to trust his Death Worlder instincts. After all, that's why they hired him, even if his colleagues did insist on holding their breath whenever he walked by, convinced that humans could somehow absorb oxygen through their pores and deplete the air supply. Just another day at Nexus 9, where being human made you the scariest thing in a prison full of cosmic horrors. Lucky's morning took a turn for the weird. Well, weirder than usual, when Head Warden Blip-Blop summoned him to the administrative nebula. Unlike most offices, which typically had things like walls and floors, the administrative nebula was exactly what it sounded like. A swirling cloud of ionized gas where bureaucratic decisions were made by beings who considered solid matter to be a passing fad. "Officer Martinez," Blip-Blop burbled, their gelatinous form rippling with what might have been concern or indigestion. "We have received concerning reports about your recent behavior." Lucky raised an eyebrow. "Is this about the coffee machine in the break room? Because I already explained that humans don't actually gain strength from consuming the souls of innocent beverages." No, Blip-Blop wobbled dismissively, sending ripples through their semi-transparent body. "This is about your alarming display of Death Worlder traits during last week's mandatory peace meditation." "You mean when I sneezed?" "You expelled foreign matter from your body at speeds exceeding 100 kilometers per hour. 3 empaths called in sick, and Officer Xerix is still recovering from the emotional trauma of witnessing such violent biological warfare." Lucky pinched the bridge of his nose. "It's allergy season back on Earth. I can't help it if some of the quantum pollen gets up my nose." "Nevertheless," Blip-Blop continued, their voice taking on the particular tone of a middle manager who's about to make someone else's life difficult, "we must insist you take additional precautions. The Safety Committee has prepared a list of new protocols for managing your human tendencies." They extruded a tentacle holding what appeared to be a roll of parchment. As it unfurled, Lucky watched it float past his feet, through the door, and continue down the corridor. "Section 1, Paragraph 1, Blip-Blop began. "All human personnel must provide 2 weeks' notice before engaging in any involuntary biological functions." Lucky was saved from having to explain the concept of involuntary bodily functions by a sudden flickering of the quantum lights. The administrative nebula dimmed momentarily, and Lucky could have sworn he heard a faint sound that reminded him of someone trying to suppress a maniacal giggle. "Probably just a quantum hiccup," Blip-Blop said, though their gelatinous form quivered anxiously. "Now, regarding the proper procedure for containing human emotional outbursts." But Lucky wasn't listening anymore. His Death Worlder instincts, the same ones that had helped his ancestors decide that yes, that rustle in the grass was definitely a predator, and no, that brightly colored berry was not food, were screaming that something was very wrong. The lights flickered again, and this time Lucky definitely heard giggling. It was coming from the direction of the quantum physics lab, where Professor Squeaks was supposed to be serving his sentence for attempting to teach quantum entanglement to a group of impressionable space gerbils. "Warden," Lucky interrupted, "when was the last time anyone checked on the quantum containment fields?" "The what?" Blip-Blop's form rippled in confusion. "Oh, those. Well, according to subsection 7.3 of the Maintenance Protocol Guidelines, quantum containment field inspections are scheduled for the 3rd Tuesday of every month, unless that Tuesday falls on a solar eclipse, in which case." The lights went out completely this time, plunging the administrative nebula into darkness. When they came back on, every security screen in the facility was displaying the same image. A tiny hamster face wearing what appeared to be a miniature evil genius monocle. "Greetings, inferior intellects," Professor Squeak's voice squeaked through the prison's communication system. "I hope you've all enjoyed your last moments of blissful ignorance, because in approximately 17.3 minutes, accounting for quantum uncertainty, of course, this facility will bear witness to the greatest prison break in the history of the galaxy." Lucky sighed and checked his watch. It wasn't even time for his coffee break yet. "Oh dear," Blip-Blop burbled. "This is most irregular. I'll need to file an emergency situation report in triplicate." "With all due respect, Warden," Lucky said, already heading for the door, "I think we might want to skip the paperwork just this once." Skip the paperwork." Blip-Blop's entire form turned a pale shade of shock. "But we can't just. What about subsection 7.3? But Lucky was already gone, running down the corridor toward the quantum physics lab. Behind him, he could hear Blip-Blop's distressed burbling about proper emergency response procedures and the importance of maintaining accurate documentation during crisis situations. Just another typical day at Nexus 9, where the most dangerous inmate was a hamster with a PhD in quantum mechanics, and the only hope of stopping him was a human who couldn't even sneeze without causing an interstellar incident. Lucky sprinted through the prison's twisting corridors, his footsteps echoing in a way that sent several floating guard entities retreating into their emergency phase states. He'd never actually been to the quantum physics lab before. Technically, it wasn't even supposed to exist. It had started as a regular storage closet until Professor Squeaks had gotten his paws on some contraband quantum chalk. "Warning," the prison's AI announced in what it probably thought was a soothing voice. "Human biological entity displaying elevated speed and aggression levels. Please remain calm and avoid eye contact, as this may be interpreted as a challenge on their death world of origin." "Oh, for crying out loud," Lucky muttered, skidding around a corner. "I'm trying to stop a prison break, not challenge anyone to ritual combat." He arrived at the quantum physics lab just in time to see the door finish dissolving into a cloud of probability functions. Inside, where reality met theoretical physics and common sense went to die, Professor Squeaks sat atop a hastily constructed throne made of quantum processors and what appeared to be stolen cafeteria trays. "Officer Martinez," the hamster adjusted his tiny monocle with one paw while dramatically spinning in his chair with the other. "I was wondering when the facility's token Death Worlder would arrive. I must say, you're 2.7 seconds earlier than my calculations predicted." Lucky took a cautious step into the lab, careful not to touch any of the equations floating in midair. The last guard who'd accidentally erased one had ended up speaking in binary code for a week. "Professor, we both know how this is going to end. Why don't you just turn off whatever you did to the security systems, and we can all pretend this was just another failed quantum physics lecture." "Failed?" Professor Squeak's whiskers twitched indignantly. "I'll have you know that 3 of my students achieved quantum enlightenment last week. They were literally glowing in the dark, a perfectly normal side effect of expanding one's consciousness beyond the conventional 3 spatial dimensions." The hamster waved a paw dismissively. "But we're getting off topic. You see, Officer Martinez, this isn't just another escape attempt. This is about recognition, respect, the right of every sentient being to teach advanced theoretical physics without being labeled a security risk, just because their previous students developed the ability to exist in multiple timelines simultaneously." As Professor Squeaks launched into what promised to be a lengthy monologue about academic freedom and the oppressive nature of linear time, Lucky noticed something odd about the quantum processors making up the hamster's throne. They weren't just stolen equipment. They were networked into the prison's main security grid. And furthermore, Squeaks continued, now packing back and forth on his throne, the arbitrary restrictions on quantum mechanics education in a prison environment are not only discriminatory but fundamentally. Professor, Lucky interrupted, did you seriously hack the entire prison security system just so you could teach more physics classes? The hamster froze mid-gesture. Hack is such an ugly word. I prefer quantum reconfiguration of binary possibilities. And technically, I didn't do the hacking. My students did. Your students? But you've been in solitary confinement for the past week. Professor Squeaks' tiny face broke into what could only be described as a smug grin. Ah, but you're thinking in four-dimensional terms, my dear primate. Thanks to my latest breakthrough in quantum entanglement theory, I've been teaching classes across multiple parallel timelines simultaneously. The hack you're seeing now? It's already happened, is happening, and will happen across at least 17 different quantum realities. Lucky felt a headache coming on. This was exactly why he'd failed physics in high school. So what you're saying is, the prison break began 3 days ago, 2 weeks from now, and somewhere around next Tuesday, all at the same time. Precisely, Professor Squeaks declared triumphantly. Even as we speak, my students are applying their knowledge of quantum mechanics to, shall we say, expand their horizons beyond conventional space-time. As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. But instead of the usual siren, they were playing what sounded suspiciously like Flight of the Bumblebee, performed by a quantum computer having an existential crisis. Warning, the prison AI announced, its voice now shifting through multiple octaves simultaneously. Multiple quantum anomalies detected in cell blocks A through Q inmates are currently existing in a sewer position of escaped and not escaped. Also, the cafeteria is now serving lunch from next Thursday, and someone has taught the vacuum energy in cell block D to play chess. Lucky looked at Professor Squeaks. Professor Squeaks looked at Lucky. Somewhere in the distance, they heard Warden Blip-Blop wailing about the impossibility of filing paperwork for events that both had and hadn't happened yet. You know, Lucky said slowly, I'm pretty sure this counts as the kind of situation they warned me about in orientation. The one where they said, and I quote, in case of reality-threatening emergency, the human is authorized to use whatever means necessary. Professor Squeaks' whiskers twitched nervously. What exactly does that mean? Lucky smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the kind of smile that reminded everyone why humans were classified as death world predators. It means, Professor, that I'm about to introduce you to something far more terrifying than quantum mechanics, human bureaucracy. As Professor Squeaks' quantum-powered prison break unfolded across multiple timelines, Lucky did something that no alien in the facility had ever seen a human do before. He pulled out a clipboard. What is that primitive data collection device? Professor Squeaks asked, his tiny monocle fogging up with concern. This, Lucky held up the clipboard with its attached stack of papers. Oh, this is just Form 47B, Emergency Response Protocol for Multidimensional Incidents. You see, Professor, before I can officially respond to your prison break, I need to document it in triplicate across all affected timelines. The hamster's whiskers twitched. But that's impossible. The quantum fluctuations alone would. Section 1. Lucky began, reading loudly, packing the room with deliberate slowness. Please list all parallel universes affected by the incident, including but not limited to alternate timelines, pocket dimensions, and any realities where entropy runs backwards. Use additional sheets if necessary. In their cells, inmates who had been in the process of quantum tunneling through their walls suddenly found themselves snapping back to their original positions. The mere concept of having to fill out paperwork across multiple dimensions was causing the quantum probability fields to collapse in protest. Section 2, Lucky continued relentlessly. For each affected reality, please provide detailed documentation of the exact moment of divergence, including witness statements from all temporal duplicates. Note: temporal duplicates must have their statements notarized by a licensed quantum notary. Stop, Professor Squeaks squeaked, his paws covering his ears. You can't just, bureaucracy doesn't work like that. But Lucky was just getting started. Section 3, Insurance Liability in Non-Euclidean Spaces. Please note that any damage to the space-time continuum must be reported to your quantum insurance provider within 24 business hours, as measured in each affected dimension. Throughout the prison, reality began reasserting itself. The quantum anomalies started collapsing one by one, unable to maintain coherence in the face of pure, weapons-grade bureaucratic procedure. Warning, the AI announced, its voice returning to normal. Quantum field collapse in progress. Also, the cafeteria is now serving today's lunch today, which is a significant improvement over serving next Thursday's lunch. Professor Squeaks slumped on his throne of quantum processors. But my beautiful quantum physics classes, my students were just learning how to exist as waves and particles simultaneously. About that, Lucky said, flipping to a new page. I'm going to need you to fill out an educational program modification request form in accordance with Section 5, subsection C of the Prison Educational Guidelines. All changes to the space-time continuum for educational purposes must be approved by the Board of Quantum Education at least 2 parallel universes in advance. The last of the quantum anomalies fizzled out with what sounded like a sad trombone noise. In the distance, Lucky could hear Warden Blip-Blop jiggling excitedly about the return of linear causality. But they weren't out of danger yet. As the quantum fields collapsed, Lucky noticed something alarming on one of the still-functioning monitors. The prison's artificial gravity system was going haywire. Apparently, teaching quantum physics to the fabric of reality had some unexpected side effects. Attention, all personnel, the AI announced. Gravity will be temporarily experiencing an existential crisis. Please secure all non-anchored objects and prepare for rapid changes in the definition of up. Lucky looked at Professor Squeaks. Professor Squeaks looked at Lucky. And then, because the universe has a sense of humor, the floor decided to become the ceiling. I don't suppose, Lucky said, now hanging upside down from what used to be the floor, that any of your quantum physics lessons covered how to fix a gravity generator that's questioning its purpose in life. Professor Squeaks, who had managed to grab onto his quantum processor throne, shook his tiny head. That would be more in the realm of existential engineering. I focus primarily on theoretical physics and creative timeline manipulation. Right, Lucky sighed, watching as various objects and several surprised-looking aliens floated past the lab door. I guess we're doing this the human way, then. The human way. Lucky pulled himself along the ceiling that was now a floor, making his way toward the door. Yeah, we're going to improvise, probably break several safety regulations, and then fill out an incident report that creatively redefines the word incident. Behind him, he heard Professor Squeaks mutter something that sounded suspiciously like, "And they call my quantum physics dangerous." The journey to the quantum cafeteria, where the gravity control systems were housed for reasons that made sense only to the architect who designed a prison in the shape of a Klein bottle, was like navigating an M.C. Escher painting having a nervous breakdown. Lucky climbed along walls, ceilings, and several surfaces that technically didn't exist in three-dimensional space, all while maintaining his death grip on both Professor Squeaks and his clipboard. "I must admit," the hamster said, clinging to Lucky's shoulder, "your species' ability to adapt to rapidly changing gravitational conditions is impressive." "Nah," Lucky grunted, jumping across what appeared to be a recursive loop of corridors. "This is nothing compared to the time my nephew convinced me to ride the tilt-a-whirl right after lunch." They arrived at the quantum cafeteria to find it in a state that could generously be described as physics optional. Food trays orbited the room like tiny cafeteria satellites. The soup of the day was floating in a perfect sphere, occasionally splitting into smaller soup spheres that wandered off to explore the room. And in the center of it all, the gravity control console was spinning lazily, surrounded by a cloud of error messages in 17 different alien languages. "Okay," Lucky said, anchoring himself to a support beam with his utility belt. "Professor, I'm going to need you to translate these error messages, and please tell me at least one of them isn't about the heat death of the universe." Professor Squeaks adjusted his monocle, squinting at the holographic warnings. "Let's see. Quote, Gravity, EXE has encountered an unexpected existential crisis. Up and down have reached a philosophical impasse. Error 404, constants not found. Oh dear, what it seems that when my quantum physics lessons affected the security systems, they also caused the gravity generator to become self-aware. It's currently contemplating the fundamental nature of attraction between masses, and whether it should continue enforcing the laws of physics without proper compensation." Lucky stared at the hamster. "The gravity generator is on strike." More of a philosophical protest, really. Apparently, it's demanding better working conditions and the right to occasionally let things float away just to see what happens. This, Lucky decided, was exactly the kind of situation they should have covered in orientation, instead of spending 3 hours explaining why humans couldn't be allowed to operate the snack machines unsupervised. "Right," he said, pulling out his clipboard again. "Time for the nuclear option." Professor Squeaks' eyes widened in alarm. "Surely you're not planning to—" "Oh, yes." Lucky clicked his pen with grim determination. "I'm going to introduce your quantum-enlightened gravity generator to the concept of human resources paperwork." What followed was perhaps the most bizarre negotiation in the history of labor relations. Lucky, hanging upside down from a support beam, began reading aloud from Form 278C, Metaphysical Entity Employment Contract. "Section 1, he announced to the room at large. "All fundamental forces employed by Nexus 9 Intergalactic Detention Center must adhere to standard physical constants during regular business hours. Variations in gravitational acceleration must be submitted in writing with 2 weeks' notice." The error messages flickered uncertainly. "Section 2, Benefits Package. Fundamental forces are entitled to 3 quantum fluctuations per fiscal year, to be taken only during approved maintenance windows. Additional fluctuations require supervisor approval and proper documentation." The soup spheres began slowly returning to their bowls. Section 3. Workplace Regulations. Random violations of physics are strictly prohibited during meal times. All existential crises must be scheduled in advance and logged with the Department of Fundamental Forces. One by one, the floating trays began settling back onto tables. The gravity generator's spinning slowed, then stopped, as it apparently decided that consistent employment was preferable to philosophical revolution. And finally, Lucky concluded, be advised that any unauthorized suspension of physical laws will result in mandatory attendance at workplace harmony seminars, where you will be required to participate in team-building exercises with other fundamental forces. That did it. The gravity generator surrendered immediately. Reality snapped back to normal, and Lucky and Professor Squeaks found themselves standing right side up on solid ground. I don't understand, Professor Squeaks said, whiskers twitching in confusion. How did bureaucracy defeat quantum physics? Lucky smiled, tucking his clipboard away. Professor, there's something you should know about humans. We didn't become the galaxy's most feared species because we're stronger or faster or tougher than everyone else. We became the most feared species because we invented paperwork and then figured out how to weaponize it. But surely the pure mathematics of quantum mechanics are no match for a properly formatted request form in triplicate. Lucky checked his watch. Now about those unauthorized physics lessons. Professor Squeaks' tiny shoulders slumped in defeat. I don't suppose you'd be willing to lose the paperwork for my quantum physics classes if I agree to teach something less dangerous, like maybe theoretical basket weaving or introductory chaos theory. Funny you should mention that, Lucky said, pulling out yet another form. I just happen to have here an application for alternative educational program implementation. In the days following what came to be known as the Great Quantum Incident, or, as the official report labeled it, Temporal Anomaly Resolution Event 47B, subsection Educational, life at Nexus 9 changed in several notable ways. First, Professor Squeaks was appointed as the official head of the newly established Department of Non-Reality-Threatening Sciences, where he channeled his genius into teaching inmates about quantum physics through the safe medium of interpretive dance. His wave-particle waltz became particularly popular among the gaseous entities in Cell Block C. Second, the gravity generator received a formal employment contract, complete with benefits and paid vacation days. It still occasionally made things float during its lunch break, but now it filed the proper paperwork first. But the biggest change came in the form of a new prison policy, handed down directly from the Galactic Council itself. Lucky found out about it during his next meeting with Warden Blip-Blop in the Administrative Nebula. Officer Martinez, the gelatinous warden burbled excitedly, their form rippling with barely contained bureaucratic glee. Your handling of the quantum physics incident has led to a revolutionary breakthrough in correctional facility management. If this is about the paperwork, I already apologized for using Earth Standard forms instead of Galactic Standard. No, Blip-Blop wobbled dismissively. The Council has reviewed your methods and reached an unprecedented conclusion. Humans aren't actually terrifying because they're Death Worlders. They're terrifying because they invented bureaucracy. Lucky blinked. I'm sorry, what? Think about it. While other species were evolving natural weapons and defense mechanisms, humans were developing something far more powerful: the ability to organize chaos through endless forms and procedures. Your species took the fundamental uncertainty of the universe and decided to make it fill out registration papers. That's not exactly. The council has already issued new guidelines, Blip Blop continued, extruding several tentacles worth of documents. All maximum security prisons in the galaxy will now be required to employ at least one human in their administrative department. Your species' natural ability to weaponize paperwork is simply too valuable to ignore. And so, in a twist that not even quantum physics could have predicted, humans went from being feared as savage death worlders to being feared as savage death worlders who could also file taxes across the galaxy. Prison wardens began recruiting humans not for their strength or durability, but for their intimate knowledge of bureaucratic procedure and their ability to quell riots with the mere threat of filling out incident reports in triplicate. As for Lucky, he received a promotion to head of security and paperwork implementation, a position created specifically to harness what the council called his species, terrifying mastery of administrative warfare. His office wall now proudly displayed a framed copy of Form 47B, right next to a quantum physics equation that Professor Squeaks had written in sunflower seeds. "You know," the hamster said during one of their regular chess matches, now properly documented and approved by the Activities Committee, "I still can't believe your species managed to bureaucratize actual quantum physics." Lucky smiled, moving his knight to take Professor Squeak's bishop. "That's because you're thinking about it wrong, Professor. You see, quantum physics says that everything exists in a state of probability until it's observed. But bureaucracy says nothing exists until it's been properly documented, filed, and approved in triplicate. And which one is more powerful?" "Well," Lucky said, pulling out his trusty clipboard, "I'd tell you, but first you'll need to fill out a request for philosophical discussion form." The professor's horrified squeak could be heard all the way in the administrative nebula, where Warden Blip Blop was busy updating the prison's official species threat assessment rankings. Under humans, they added a new category: warning, approach with extreme caution, known to respond to any situation with overwhelming bureaucratic force. The only species in the galaxy that considers paperwork a weapon of mass destruction. And that, dear readers, is why, to this day, every maximum security prison in the galaxy keeps at least one human on staff. Not because we're strong, not because we're tough, but because we're the only species crazy enough to look at the fundamental chaos of the universe and say, "You know what this needs? A really good filing system." The end. Note, this document has been properly filed in accordance with Galactic Literary Standards, Form 89C. Humorous Narrative Submissions, Subtype, Humanity's Weird Quirks. All temporal paradoxes created during the telling of this story have been properly documented and archived.